Welcome to another FACEHAMMER Advent show, and in this show, Byron's going to talk about deployment.
So, it's an obvious thing to say, but apart from writing your army list, this is one of the first things that happens in the game, and a lot of games are won or lost in deployment. So, I thought I would touch on 6 keystones, which I think are generally useful bearing in mind. Obviously, if you're playing a particular type of army, maybe you're going to have a different strategy, but broadly speaking, these are some of the most important things that I feel that can be really useful. So if you've got your thoughts about something I've missed or you want clarification, then pop a comment below. We'll of course get back to you and let you know our thoughts on that. So in no particularly important order, it's not like one is the most important or anything. I'm going to start with something that is very, very basic, and that is that 12-inch line or the 15-inch line or whatever is the deployment line, the maximum possible. That is not mandatory. You do not have to have your guys in a row like chomping at the bit, ready to get to your opponent as soon as possible. And in a lot of situations, just being 1 or 2 inches back from that can make such a big difference in games. Being within range of shooting, being within range of dispels, whether you want to be in range to dispel your opponent or you don't want them to be within range of you, anything like that. It's just so much easier if you bear those in mind from your opponent. So it's is what it is, but I see this if you look at the top tables of the tournament and you look at the bottom tables, you'll see 2 noticeable things after deployment instantly, and one is there will be strange shapes and unconventional positions on high tables, and the other one is on the lower tables there'll be very conventionally positioned units, and they will probably just be in a line on the 12-inch line ready to run at their opponents.
It's first thing I usually do is if there's a key thing like a key shooting unit or a key spell that is going to be cast, I make sure that everything in my army is not in range of that thing. So if something's got a 24-inch, not a 24-inch range, it's probably a bit long, like an 18-inch range and a 4-inch move, you go right. Well, I need to make sure that I'm outside of 22 inches so that I don't get shot. It's just silly little things like that that you need to factor in.
Yeah, just forget the 12-inch line and imagine that didn't exist. You could be anywhere in there, which is the case, and think what that would do to your head. It's a useful mental exercise, and the most important stuff is the objectives that are on the table and your opponent's reach and your potential reach. So they should be your governing principles, not like, oh, I'm here, I'm going to stand on the 12-inch line. And I have lost games and tournaments to this myself, just being 1 inch too far forward. It's so easily done.
Because I think a lot of people, they start putting their models down, and then they get to their turn, that's when they start thinking. And you're you need to think as you're putting your models down, do I want my wizard further forward to unbind their wizards or to push their wizards to a certain point, or do I want my wizard further back so they can't be unbound? What have they got any shooting threats? What's their max move and charge, run and charge threat? Do I need to worry about that? What do I need to zone off? That kind of stuff. So it's really important.
It's do I have to absolutely get this spell off? Make sure that you're not in bind range, particularly if they've allied in an incantor or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. Let's say you need cogs to go off, and that wizard doesn't have to be close to anything. He could be back board edge, and cogs is board wide. So think about what you need, what you want out of the situation, and for all of these, whether you are going to be going first or second, just hold that in mind throughout the process. So you're either going to be bluffing or projecting whatever you do, or kind of indicating what your plan is, whether that's a bluff or otherwise. So
it's always the first thing to work out who's going to have that choice, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And then kind of all of these go hand in hand because it's all within the same phase. But my next one is use of gaming aids and knowledge of what matters on the table. So by that, to be more specific, particularly if people have got 9-inch drops away from you and then they've got things with 3-inch reach, the 3-inch reach and tagging units from Alpha Strike armies is a really, really particular one there. So if you put down a screen and your guys are exactly 3 inches behind that screen, if someone's base goes in between 2 of your bases, there's a really good chance that he's going to be 2.9 inches, which is technically less than 3. That's all that matters. And suddenly your key unit could have to run away rather than get to do whatever it wanted. Or it might have to shoot at that thing that is particularly resilient or anything like that. So just having a 3-inch stick, combat gauge, whatever it is, or awareness of where objectives, awareness of how close you're going to need to get to that if you don't measure that, you can't use your 6 for your run to reach it if that might be the thing that wins you the game or keeps you in the game. So you just need to be aware of that, like objectives, distances, use those props, and those props will remind you to check as well. If you've got a 9-inch stick to your left and you've got 3-inch stick to your right, and every phase you look at one, you look at the other and have a think, do I need to use that? Do I need to use that? It will massively help. So the other place this really comes into it is Les has played Stormcast. He knows so many people are just lax with checking if something can land behind them, and getting to land even 5 liberators behind someone could be devastating. That could ruin an entire game plan for an army.
Particularly with like in the older things with the Vexler banner, you'd be able to do it a lot. But I think one of the things that you touched on there was just like what you need to make sure it's like never like you need to measure how far you are from the objectives, how far you are within range of the objectives, just so that you know then, like you said, that if you need to turn that to a 6, the amount of times I've played people and they've moved to try and capture the objective and ran and gone like and rolled a 5. And I'm looking at them and I'm like, I'm not going to tell you to change that, to spend a command point and change that. But if you don't do a command point and change that, mathematically you're not in range of the objective because of the size of the table, and then they don't do it. It's just it's like these little things that make the difference and make and break things. So it's like knowing if you need to be on that 12-inch line to be able to run, pop the 6, get in range to capture the objective on the turn if that's your objective.
Absolutely. Pivotal. Like we've all won and lost games early in like the first or second turns for stuff that we did or didn't do. Like of these, like whatever level of gaming at, it is so important, and it never stops being something that you have to put effort into being aware of or remembering. So kind of in line with that, and it's been almost touched on already. Number 3 is to ask your opponent questions. Do you have any teleports or ambushes? What are the restrictions for those? What is your maximum reach? And that should be something you do in every game, regardless of whether it's the deployment phase or the hero phase, or it's turn 5 or 1 or 0. Whatever it is, your opponent might have taken an item that changes their potential reach. They might have, I don't know, they've got this reach, but they could have cogs, which means that it could be 2 inches more. Or they could be OBR, and their potential reach was something you really want to be out of range of. Let's say it's one of the catapults. That could be buffed by 3 because they can move for a relentless discipline point or something like that. So ask the questions to your opponent. What do I need to worry about? Do you have any teleports or ambushes? What is your move? What is your maximum reach? And then if you definitely need something to not like 100% be out of range, deploy with it 100% out of range. Don't give someone a 10 and then complain. Like, this is going to be a personal bugbear of all of us, I can guarantee. When like your opponent, you've told your opponent what your maximum reach is, and you've got a pretty resilient, hard-hitting unit, Star Drake, that's got run and charge off a Heralder or whatever. And your opponent's like, oh, okay, well, so its maximum is this, and you could use a 6 on your run, but you might not do that, so I'll leave it here, and then you'd have to get like a 9 or more. And you're like, cool, run, failed the charge, command point reroll because I've got it available, or ability or something like that, or you cast cogs and you buffed it, and then your opponent complains when you get in. If you absolutely, your game will be ruined if someone gets in range and it is little interruption to your overall plan, then do exactly that and make sure it is 100% out if that is a good idea for you. So kind of communication about what could be coming to you in the face or other stuff, and then how you're going to work around that. And pick a hard line. Don't be woolly. If you don't want to be within maximum range, don't be within maximum range.
Yeah. Don't give him a 12-inch charge if you don't want him to get charged.
Exactly. You'll get dieseled.
Yeah, you'll get dieseled.
Old fantasy term.
Yeah.
But particularly if you are playing someone who is going to go for everything, don't give them 3 opportunities that are like a 20% chance and then moan when they get one of them. Like, just don't do it if you don't need to. So that's kind of the big point of that one. Number 4, touching on something that we've already mentioned, is just have a plan. I've put objectives here in brackets. Like, it is so important to know what you should be doing, and that comes down to knowing your army, knowing your opponent's army, asking questions, stuff like that. But if you don't have a plan, and that could be like, I have to deploy like this, so I'm in an armor buff in turn 1, daughters, Stormcast, whatever. It could be something like that, or it could be, I need to be able to use a 6 on these guys' run to score that objective because I think my opponent's going to give me the first turn, and it's really important for me to get ahead. Having a plan, knowing what's going on, knowing the scenario, your army, your opponent's army, and the distances, tie them all together. And if you feel like you've got a plan, you're going to make less mistakes, and you don't have to work stuff out on the fly if you already decided it before. So you've got less decisions later on in your deployment, but also later on in the game because you prepared for it better.
It's easier as well to contextualize your decision when you get in the game and stuff. You start being posed with, do I go charge and kill that thing? If you've already decided turn one, I'm going to take these two objectives with these chaff units, and I'm going to follow up with these units, then on that turn, that's what you do. You don't get distracted because you've already in your head worked out your two plan. And it particularly comes into play if you've got like hidden agendas and stuff like that you want to complete. That, you know, if you're playing those auxiliary objective rules, then you can kind of go, well, this is advancing me towards winning the game. Like, so I need to just stay on point and stay on target for that. So when you deploy,
absolutely,
you're planning for how you're going to win the game, mission, and what mission objectives you're going to go for. They might change because not everything survives contact with the randomness of Warhammer, but you need to sort of start from that point, I think.
Yeah, absolutely, for sure. So bear the objectives in mind. That games are won on objectives. So don't like your plan could be to kill your opponent's army and then stand on the objectives, but just make sure that your plan does involve the word objective in it. It sounds basic, but it's really easily done. Particularly someone drops like a 700-point Death Star with a 500-point character next to it. You get like the blinkers on and you try and kill it. Often it doesn't matter.
The amount of games that I've won because my opponents got a little bit distracted by the stuff that they need to kill. I mean, back in the day with the Silver Army, I used to do it all the time, especially what was the mission where you could auto win turn 3 where you capture the 4 objectives? Blood and Glory. It would be the amount of times I'd be like, I'm going to push these 6 Scythe Hunters directly to the center of the table and go on then. Yep. And then when I push them into the center of the objectives, the tree revs go onto that the back of the board edge behind them, and then they come and go, oh, I'm going to go ignore the tree revs, go kill the Scythe Hunters because that's the big threat. And then if I win the double, I just move the tree revs onto the objectives, and I've got all 4 and I win the game. And they're like, oh, objectives are key.
Yeah, exactly. You could be 2 6 run rolls with pathetic, like 2 guys left with 1.5 wounds between them, away from winning a game because your opponent is concentrating on killing, not on objectives. So that's the have a plan objectives. Following that up, and not every army does have a plan. You don't need to have a plan. Then you're in a different, the ball's in a different court and you are reactive. So either you need to have a plan and do it and not deviate from it because your opponent's probably trying to get you to deviate from it unless exactly necessary. It's a difficult line for me to say you do this with certain armies, you don't with other armies, but you probably know if you're playing it or your own personal play style. If you are having a reactive approach to it, then react going on those objectives and your opponent. So don't, like, if you need to be countering what your opponent does because you got an army that drops from the sky or whatever, don't do things that are going to restrict you from being able to do that. Don't put some things on the table because suddenly you start thinking about scoring that objective turn 1 when actually, you need to tag your opponent's unit in their turn 1 or something like that. So there are, generally speaking, 2 types of armies. One is have a plan, deploys in a block. Russ has played a load of these armies, like old school warriors were like this. This goes here, this goes on the left or right, and this character stands between this or that. Ogres sometimes play like that as well. And then other armies, Deepkin, are just like, you don't particularly have something, but you do need to be ready to counter what your opponent is doing, the problems that they present. You do need to be able to have a way to deal with them. So bear that in mind. Don't suddenly get mono-focused on like one part of it. The final point is kind of how to deal with drops and how to view what you are doing on the table. So whatever you're doing in this scenario, you are going to be doing one of 2 things. Touched on this already. You're going to be withholding information or broadcasting information. And either of those can be a bluff. Either of them can be straight up. But you should hold in mind who's going first, who's going second. And if you're going to get the choice, if you want your opponent to think that you're going to make the other choice by doing certain things. So you can be really assertive, be like, here's a massive block here, there on the 12-inch line. Your opponent's like, oh God, I'll stay back from those because he's going to take first turn and run at me. And then you're like, right, here's defensive unit, here's this, here's something that doesn't really matter that's got long range. And your opponent deploys because they've got it into their head that you are taking first turn. Then you put your other things in a completely different orientation. And your opponent's deployed like you're going to do one thing and you're doing the other, and then straight there off the bat, almost regardless of whether you've done it well or not, if they thought you had a different plan, they are already on the back foot. It's just useful. So whatever you're putting on the table is an indication of your plan. So be mindful of that, whether it is to give people misinformation or to kind of hold off until the very last point for something that's really important that you can't get around, and that is definitely going to broadcast something. So a big monster that needs to go into their key unit, or something that can't go opposite an ethereal unit because it won't be able to touch it. Stuff like that. And that's it, basically. I mean, everyone's got their own different approaches to this, but I think there's several touchstones. And when I started, at least, I didn't consider any of these. I just put my dudes down and then got annoyed when they were in each other's way or whatever.
I think they're good points just to bear in mind during gameplay, and just to understand what your army needs, buff wise, range wise, what its potential threat is. I find one of the things that's good, and then Byron was talking about, telegraphing whether you're going first or second or whatever. If you're the person without the choice, so if you are not going to get the choice to go first or second, try and put something on the table which in a position which means your opponent doesn't want you to go first. So if you're saying, well, if you deploy in a very negative way that you're out of range of everything, they can't do anything to you, they're 100% gonna give you the first turn, and your first turn you're gonna be like, I'm just basically redeploying, and it doesn't really have any benefit. Now that might be great if you need to buff your men with spells and stuff that you haven't got up yet, and that's exactly what you want to do. But if you want to make your opponent think about turn 1 or 2, the scenario, if you definitely want to go first, make sure that the scenario might influence that decision as well. But if you have long range shooters that are in range, if you deploy them right on the back board edge out of range, they don't have to worry about you being shot on turn 1. So they might take turn 1 to get up on the scenario. If you deploy stuff forward, they might be tempted with that 8-inch charge on their combat unit. If they fail that charge, then they're going to be in a really bad position and potentially going to be double turned. So you can leave stuff as bait that you don't need to win that mission, but could force them into a bad decision. And those things, so even if they've got all the choice, you've got the power to make that choice difficult, which is what I'm trying to say. So you could do that through list design, you could do that from how you set up. So think about that, because it's quite easy for people to start second guess themselves at the table.
For sure. I mean, hand in hand with that, including one thing with long range in your list, whether it's a wizard with a spell or a catapult or a unit of long range shooters like Judicators, is a fantastic way to do it. And there's often not a particular negative to having one unit of those in there. But you could threaten someone's wizard by putting your 28-inch threat range Judicators down on the 12-inch line that they can't reach anyway, and force them into an awkward position.
But even if they can reach, they take the first turn and alpha strike them. You've lost 5 Judicators, so you could get a double turn back, and their units now in the middle of your army. Yeah. Some armies like fighting around themselves. My Khorne always liked to, but the thing that Khorne had, they didn't have a way to make the opponent come at you. And that's why in my old Khorne list back in the day, I used to have 2 warp lightning cannons.
Yep, perfect example.
So, anyway.
Absolutely. All right, so that is my top 6 tips to bear in mind whilst trying to improve your deployment. If you've got different opinions on how that works, or you really like Les's ridiculous cat, then by all means let us know in the comments below.
That's a cat.
Please like, comment, and kitten, subscribe. Amazing. Cheers, guys.
All right, thanks for watching.
Cheers, bye.